number one, I believe, Matt, you mentioned last year, maybe 2 years ago, Lagarde actually floated a trial balloon as well at that point, saying she might be quitting early. She vehemently defended against that, said she was not going to be doing that. This time, a little bit different. We're not hearing her come out and say, nope, this is actually all untrue. There's some word out that, some gossip out that she might be leaving before the end of her term. But I think the critical thing from my perspective here, and I'm sure, Matt, you're going to go deeper into why this matters, but I think the critical thing here is she's actually saying she wants to make sure that if she does depart, that Macron and Merz, France and Germany, are the key European leaders choosing who succeeds her, right? So this is actually in the article from Reuters. This is not an opinion piece or anything like that. This is just the reporting directly from Reuters. And so, Matt, you had some broader implications here and kind of even just background on how Lagarde got into her position. But for me, very interesting that she is not going to be leaving early unless she has that kind of blessing from France and Germany specifically.
Yeah. So, Cameron, you mentioned, yeah, last June, I think the first trial balloon was floated. Either she's ready to go or someone wants her out, which I think is, maybe both things could be true. But yeah, the notable statement from June of 2025, Christine Lagarde says, "You guys haven't seen the back of me yet, right?" Well, last week, I think it was Thursday, you saw floated from FT out of the city of London saying, hey, Lagarde's planning to quit before the end of Macron's term. And there was some pushback against it, but it was nowhere near the same degree we heard last June. So, all right, what's happening here? You obviously have the situation with, if you look at individual European countries, there's a sovereigntist movement that's active within each kind of nation state borders. So if you think about the internal politics, France, for example, you have Marine Le Pen. Um, she was prohibited from running in the most recent election, right? Through um, basically just like criminal conviction. Um, I don't know, kangaroo court type of charges for using European Union funds inappropriately, that type of stuff. All right, you have a similar situation. Each European nation state has this, right? If you look at it under the hood, Germany, you've got the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland party as well. If you think about the Eurozone experiment as exactly that, it cannot have these. It is not consistent with these sovereigntist um, governance authorities taking control of the European nation states. So it's fundamentally incompatible with that worldview. So you've seen basically through like all routes available, any means justifies the ends, like almost is the way this has played out so far. Anything that can be done to prevent that sovereigntist authority from taking control of any of the reins of any of these legacy institutions, whether it's the government itself or it's say the European Central Bank or the national central banks in each of these countries. The legacy institutionalists are going to use whatever tools are at their disposal to prevent their I call it like the Napoleonic experiment to unite the continent of Europe and basically displace the sovereignty of the individual nation states for this larger continental government. This is part of that story. So the thing is, though, there's a lot of power struggle between those nation states themselves from their own members of the kind of the leadership class who has the reins of these seats in each one of these countries. So what do I mean by that? So President Lagarde taking, control or, leadership of the European Central Bank was actually a political deal made between Macron and Angela Merkel in 2020 And the horse trading was, and it's basically to balance out France and Germany as the top two in the power structure of this continental experiment, with Brussels as the middle ground. Um, Christine Lagarde got to head the European Central Bank, and Ursula von der Leyen, Merkel's one of her deputies, would get to lead the European Commission. Both unelected. This isn't pro-democracy, like hiding in the veil of democracy and all that. Um, at the end of the day, it's deal making to preserve authority of the legacy institutional framework and governance structure. So what we're seeing here with the exit stage left from Christine Lagarde in this headline that floated last week, it kind of just represents the more of the same of how Europe has operated basically since, I don't know, the
Yeah,
beginning of our livable memory. I was going to say back to World War II, but it's been well before that, centuries before that. So I think in hindsight, it's just like, yeah, this is they aren't changing. And when I say they, I mean like the European technocrats who largely come from the upper crust of society. You know, these people have family crests, patents of nobility, all of that, um, and they're just not with the times, in my opinion. So you can look at, so think about the ECB itself in the central banking context. It is the new kid on the block. It is the youngest central bank experiment, right? Started in the late 90s after, decades of negotiations and planning and project management. Predate, or the Fed predates it by a good half century or like more, like 80 years. Bank of Japan by probably 150, Bank of England by solid 300 years. Like
it's like
century,
1800s, something like that. Yeah.
it is it is the startup of central banks and monetary frameworks, right? So if you think about this in this context, everything you hear from ECB uh, governance leadership presidents, right? There have been four total. I think notably, like just to foot to where the headspace is of this institution, Mario Draghi's 2020 2012 comments, like we're going to do whatever it takes and that'll be enough, right? It's kind of that. Like they're going to force this thing through one way or the other. You are not going to do anything about it. Doesn't matter what the people want, what the rest of the world wants, whatever. We are going to impose our will upon you. It's kind of the mindset as I take it. But if you look at like the task in front of them, they have to build out this monetary architecture essentially from scratch, right? So if like to make an analogy here for their counterpart with the Fed, right? You've got a similar situation with Jerome Powell coming to the end of his second term in May. And by all looks, it looks like it'll just be despite all the hand wringing and haranguing, people talking about central bank independence, really the Senate vote for confirmation of Kevin Warsh as the new chair, um, the replacement,
Gonna go for.
all of that. It should just be smooth sailing, right? And so it's not the chair, it's not the celebrity that the project was all about from the US context with the Federal Reserve, um, which is itself just one institution in a much bigger picture of a monetary framework developing that's really showcase. Like I can go back and someday I'll make the case, like where does the dollar start? It starts in Central and Eastern Europe, right? With a guy named Thaler uh, coining gold, and they call it the Schlichtenthaler. Then it turned into the dollar or the dollar, all of that. You get the Spanish dollar, and then you get the U.S. then forks and puts it, or like then uh, basically just anchors to the proxy of the Spanish dollar, weight in silver, weight in gold, all of that metal coinage. And the dollar itself is this framework. Even the US dollar is riding on top of this framework that isn't imposed on anybody. It's everybody adopting through cooperation and um, independent adoption and self-selection, right? That's where, if you think about what is the euro, right? It's a It's a monetary project that's trying to bootstrap itself from the grounds up and trying to basically force adaptation onto its members. That's why the euro itself, in my opinion, will never ever be the international reserve currency that the dollar played the role of. My point there, we'll pick on this topic a lot more in the future, but think about the dollar, right? How many countries anchor themselves to the dollar? They peg themselves to a US dollar standard, right? The Hong Kong dollar
There's
maintains a dollar
yeah, I
peg.
mean,
You can go
countless.
through the UAE dirham, like most of the Middle Eastern currencies, and several of them are named the dollar, anchor themselves to a dollar peg. You got the Singapore dollar, the Australian dollar, the New Zealand dollar, the Canadian dollar. That dollar term means like there's signal there. It means all of these societies, these nation states, are trying to affix themselves onto some standard of value. And for this era, for the last, I don't know, let's say 50, 100 years, whatever, we anchored to the US dollar as that measurement. But what it's really anchoring to is like a loose, disorderly, like consistency of value that just emerges, like it pulls itself up by its own bootstraps. I'll think about this more in the future and come back with a better way to present this case. But the euro, in my opinion, is the opposite of that. It's technocratically trying to create this monetary project, like, and it's run through like an org chart, like it's a corporation, right?
Right.
With project managers, with a Gantt chart and timelines to be checked off, and that's exactly what you see, right? It's like we're going to release the CBDC. It's on track for this date. It's never there, right? We've never seen this CBDC. It doesn't have any traction. There is no adoption. Or the Savings and Investment Union. Uh, it's coming. What is it? Like, it's got to release this on time. There's nothing there, right? Or if there is, like, okay, maybe they'll get it off the ground, but it's behind schedule and nobody wants it, right? So if you think about Christine Lagarde's term in that context, what has she accomplished? If you look, what is her biggest accomplishment? It's this TPI, this protection instrument, which is basically just allowing the ECB to purchase um, the government debt of each of the kind of the governments that are represented one-to-one mapping with the national central banks, right? That's it, right? So, and then if you compare what's been accomplished in Jerome Powell's term the last 5 to 10 years, SOFR to LIBOR transition.
A lot.
Uh,
Yeah.
like we can go through the laundry list here. Like he's governed through like the same period of monetary transition that like this is why Cameron, you and I meet every week to talk about mine print hash, what's going on uh, with people's monetary framework. Um, and I'd say the track record for Christine Lagarde has been um, I know she still has some time left, but the grade, you'd say incomplete or it would be very low, right? Maybe when Powell finally completes his transition in May, we'll talk about his track record. But the compare and contrast to what we've seen for the dollar and the US and even the Fed as it enters this new era, um, it's I would say like they're not in the same league,
And
despite these two Christine Lagarde trying to show camaraderie with Jerome Powell as a central banker. I think there's a massive gulf of distance between the two of them. But
and to maybe
yeah, if I
summarize
haven't
for
made it more
viewers,
clear,
I was just gonna
yeah,
say I think that Matt has spent a lot of time going through kind of this new rerouting of global trade, needing this new monetary framework over the top of that. And I think what you're trying to get across here is if you look at Lagarde and what she's done with the euro and how they're approaching kind of this new world of rerouted trade, I think the question to ask yourself is, do you think she set them up well for that future, right? And I don't think that what you're saying, what you're explaining here, it sounds like that she did not, or you probably wouldn't grade her very highly in being able to do that as we move forward.
no, no, and I know everything. It's situation times opportunity, or it's the product of those two things for every individual, no matter how talented you are, right?
Sure.
Christine Lagarde, extremely intelligent, very capable individual, top of the class attributes, all of that raw talent. But situation and opportunity dictate everything. So if you go through what was the, it's like, all right, we've got the NFL draft coming up, and we've got top two, three, like the elite candidates, specifically trying to avoid being drafted by the New York Jets,
Right.
right? It's like there's places you don't want to go. They're dead ends. And I think, all right, so in the picture of what is the product you have to sell, think about everything we talked about in that first hour. I know we went
We're
way
two
long this
hours. I
episode,
think
but
we should start a.
we we dealt with some meaty topics, but think about this from the context of the United States. If you're say a representative from this administration, you're going into each of these meetings head to head with the leadership of all your fellow countries that you're trying to bring into your orbit as a partner. In my view, you've got a very strong sell like product to sell them, like a vision to sell them. And I'm just, Cameron, we're just a couple guys on a blog. We're fund managers, right? Um, but we're not in the circle. They should know their product or their vision even better and communicate it. My point there, they have a strong vision, a strong product that they should be able to sell. With the Eurocentric vision, I know they've had the product for the last 5 centuries, but like it's stale at this point, right? If you keep trying to sell the same thing, um, yeah,
Yeah.
nobody's picking up what you're putting down, in my opinion. So I think these 5 years of Christine Lagarde, um, whoever's next, I mean, there's nothing but opportunity ahead. I guess we'll just say
Yep.
that.